One is a mug by Andrew Linderman. The other is a plate by Liz Vukelich. No troll comments, Liz. So I opened this up to general comments. I thought about limiting the comments to people who I follow, just so that we don't get any trolls coming in. And though I say it's a public critique, I'm mostly going to be doing the critique. Andrew was interested in other people's feedback. Hearts are great. Yay, Andrew has joined. And Paul. Hey, Paul, I was listening to you this morning. Your interview with Dina Mert was lovely. So anyway, we're going to set up some rules for the critique here. Mostly, hey, Gene. Mostly, you guys are welcome to make a few comments. I'm going to try and focus on Andrew and Liz's comments as I ask them questions, so I don't get too distracted. Wow, 44 people here. Is that your connection being sad? Hello from Australia, and Deborah from Michigan is here. I don't know. Anybody else having connection problems? There's lots of people coming in. That's fantastic. Alright, no problems here. Fantastic. Troll taken care of. Alright, so let's first talk about critique, and how I critique, and how I think about pots. Because part of critique is feedback. You know, if art is communication, these two artists, Andrew Linderman and Liz Vukelich, have decided to say something with their pots, and that's really great. What my job as a critiquer is to tell them what I hear. So it's feedback, and then they get to decide what they hear, and if that is jived with what they say, and they get to refine what they're talking about. So that's the general overview of critique. It is simply feedback, and so it helps to know where the person giving you feedback is coming from. How I think about pots. Yep, these are both really straightforward, nice, functional pots. They both have a really clean sense of form and utility. I just had coffee out of Andrew's mug, so it works. And I haven't eaten off of Liz's plate yet. So, what I look for when I give a critique, before we even critique this, is a relationship of elements. So, if you look at the elements of this mug, I'm going to move Liz's plate off screen here. If you look at the elements of the mug, there's interior, there's exterior, there's the faceting, the clay treatment, there's attachments, like the handle, top and bottom attachments, width of the handle, there's the bottom of this cup, on which there's not only is there texture, but there's also a signature. Andrew, I noticed inside here it looks like there's numbers. Is that correct? Do you number each mug? This 137? Yes. Okay. So it's a numbering system. Is that an important part of the aesthetics of this cup for you? So I'm going to keep talking about those elements. We have weight. We have the clay body. We have the glaze. and it's a copper glaze that turned green on one side and red on the other. This is a gas-fired. This is series number 37 from Muggs to pay for his kiln. Ah, I see. Was this like an Indiegogo campaign? Nice. Okay, so we have all those elements, and the way I think about it is, are they working in concert to convey the concepts that Andrew wants to convey? Not quite an Indiegogo campaign. Okay. By making choices with each of these elements on the cup, Andrew's choosing to talk about something. So like the width of this faceting line, and the way this kind of curves. It's not a straight facet. His choice to not facet right to the rim. The width of the handle. The opening. The way that, can you see how the glaze flows over the top and merges? These are all choices he made. This leftover lump inside at the bottom, that ring. I push people to take ownership of those things because they're intentional statements. And maybe the statement is, this was casually made. So we have to look at other elements to see if those are conveying the same idea of casually made. There's a nice plump style. It's a really good functional mug. It's light. It's on all functional levels. This mug works great. The handle's comfortable. I can get 2 fingers in there. It served me coffee well. So functionality isn't going to be an issue. So given that functionality is met, now we're just talking about aesthetic choices and what is Andrew choosing to talk about. I like the way I respond well to the way the faceting is wide as the handle is wide. The faceting, though, journeys a little bit. It widens out with the swell of the cup and comes back down again. So there's a nice relationship. Andrew paid attention to where the handle was. It was set up such that it lined up nicely with that swell and that particular facet. The handle's right in line with that. But the handle doesn't really respond to the form on this point. It responds to the form more in the curve along here and back in, but it's fairly rigid, whereas the cup itself swells and sits comfortably. This thin handle competes a little bit with its rigidity. I also think that the handle feels fairly thin for such a stout cup. Like, I worry this edge feels unlike anything else. It doesn't feel like this edge. It has a little bit of this quality, but it's so fine. There's also a little bit of a nice, sort of a functional thumb area here, but again, that's unlike anything else on the cup. It is a stout cup. I would happily drink stout out of it. I think this is an interesting choice to have this. No, it's not really small. It's a good amount of coffee. I think it's an interesting choice to have this number here. I wonder why it's in the middle. It's not quite a decorative element in relationship to anything else. Also not very, I think this is a lovely edge here, this cut faceted edge. I want that to go all the way up to the rim. That the thrown part of the rim, that ring. You like the glaze? I like the glaze too, and I think the way Andrew sent this to me, because he liked the way the glaze varied, that one glaze turned green on one side and red on the other, which is a really nice gift. It is industrial sort of number placement, but it's not an industrial mug. I'm glad this is informative. Undulating rim with facets would be interesting, Andrew, because then the choice to facet is interacting with the whole mug. You can talk about the interaction of industrial with the handmade, but I think you have to do it more than once to, comfort's a different, and another thing we could talk about. I think you have to do something more than once in order for it to be clearly that's what you want to talk about. Yes, this is Andrew Linderman's mug. So what would it, comfort is one thing. If a mug is so in service to us that you don't notice it, it's so comfortable, that can be great functional design, but it's limited in the sense that it's talking about comfort. And maybe you want to talk about discomfort a little bit. Maybe you want your mug to be noticed in the hand. Maybe you want the pot to slow you down a little bit. I think those are all really beautiful things to talk about. You can do both, but I don't know if you can do both on one mug well. Maybe you can, Keaton. It's just so if there's a nice industrial reference, I'd like to see a couple of those to know that that's intentional, so that the logic behind the cup makes sense. That's when something looks out of place, it's because there's only one of them and it confuses us. Like, why is that on there? Oh, I look over here and I can see it. Something else that makes sense. That's a great question for Andrew to answer. What the thought behind the numbers were. Your mug is getting lots of love, by the way, Andrew. Another question which is interesting is the way the bottom is treated. It has a nice cutoff line of a braided wire or something, and Andrew's signature. For me, in my training, this is an opportunity to continue the decoration. So I was really hesitant to sign with letters or numbers because I take a lot of attention, visual attention. So I chose a different route with my pots. But I think this is an opportunity, Andrew, for you to continue to talk about the things you like about the mug. I mean, you've got this nice, is it octagonal shape on the outside. It took me years to work on my signature and how to sign it in a way that I felt comfortable with. I like the fact that you're relating the mugs in number to the kiln. Maybe that's an interesting thing to talk about. Maybe a kiln stamp for these. But so you got this octagonal bottom. The lines and the thin lines of the cutoff wire that decorate the bottom don't have width or attention that is like the lines on the rest of the cup. I want to see those things acknowledged on all the elements. The things that you like. I think that's where... So if you think about all these elements that we're making on a cup or a bowl or whatever pot we're making, it's an opportunity for you to make a choice. And as we talk about you trying to make your own work and find your own voice in clay, it's those decisions that you're making that we get to see your presence in those decisions. And it becomes this evocative process where the pot becomes yours. You find your voice by making those decisions and taking ownership of them. Is there anything else you want to know about the mug, Andrew? Look at all those hearts. We're going to move on to... Yeah, first of all, huge... Oh, the bottom handle attachment. Great. Good question. So, huge, mad props to Andrew for sending me this mug and letting me critique it and put it out there for the community. All right. So let's look into the handle attachment at the bottom. Andrew Linderman. Yay, Andrew. So I'm going to try and get it in there. This line is really nice, how you attended to that on this side. It missed it on this side. So, that feels like a little bit of a disappointment that is lost there. I have a personal preference in my own handles. I don't like that crevice being sharp in there. But I have seen it on several cups where it makes sense because there's something sharp about that cup. If we take the handle off the cup, what would that handle look like that belongs on this cup, this fat cup with wide facets? That's sort of one of the questions that we ask ourselves is how do you make something that fits that cup right there? I think the width starts to relate to the faceted edges. This line starts to relate to this line. It's close in clay treatment, this thumb line there. There's some relationship there, but I don't, and this edge, I can see a relationship between this part, but I don't know if the crevice does, because the crevice is sharp and narrow. So I'm not sure I buy that. You're welcome to disregard my opinion, please. I think that's the thing about critique is it's just my opinion. Yeah, that's an interesting... Liz will tell you that often what we do when we look at our pots in the studio and give critique is we cover elements, so we're trying to see them. So I was talking about how you're welcome to disregard. I'm just telling you what I see and what I respond to. And then, just like anybody, it only needs to be wide at that point and that point. It doesn't need to be wide the whole way. It could flare. It could narrow. So that, another way to acknowledge this swell in this cup is by making something taper. The literary term would be a foil, an opposite action. Like in the thumb groove? The thumb groove is nice. It's fitting. I wonder if this groove here was more prominent, the thumb groove, and ran right into that thumb groove. And what happens if, what could happen with the thumb groove? Hourglass here. That'd be interesting. This is what we do, is we kind of talk about those things, and we go back to the studio and we try out the different things. And you respond to what you like. And that's where your voice comes out. Yeah, the focus points you're talking about, I used to get critiques when I first started that were people didn't know how to critique. Or the teacher would ask me really kind of amorphous, big questions. And the real time I learned to critique was from Michael Simon and Linda Christensen, and then Claire Ilian, when she worked with us grads, she sat us down and gave us articles, and we talked about how to critique, and set up some rules for critique. So I was trying to set that up with talking about the interrelationship of the elements. As many elements as you can think of really are what we get to talk about, and how those elements interrelate. So another thing I might bring up before I finish, Andrew, is the overlap of glaze. The overlap of glaze on this is, I don't know, it's runny, it's fluid, it's mottled. It's lovely in and of itself, but does it belong on this cup? And I think it kind of fights with the edges of the cup. The cup is plump and stout and strong. These are the adjectives I would use to describe it. But would I describe that flow of glaze as plump or stout or strong? So I would like to see it with a nice glazed termination line, or where the facets end. Yeah, the facets end. This is you've set yourself up for a line here for glazed termination. Personally, I'd like to see these facets come up and affect the rim, not just the wall of the pot. It's a skillfully made cup, though, Andrew. All right. Let's move on to the Liz's. I have to find those articles that Claire gave us. This was long ago. This was back in last millennium. Thank you, Andrew. So this is Liz Vukelich, who was one of my apprentices. Andrew, thank you heaps. Back. Thanks for sending me a mug. If you want, I think we can continue to do this. If you all are interested in sending me pots. I don't have the finances to send them back, so they're a donation. But I would happily return with this kind of intention. So email me at simonlevin.com if you're interested. So let's look at this. This is a wood-fired porcelain plate by Liz Vukelich. You all see? Fired, let's see. Liz, was this fired right side up or upside down? Let's look at those drips. It fired right side up. You can tell by the drips. This side was towards the fire. This side was towards the chimney. There was a big ball of clay here. And the flame came and broke around it like this. So that ball of clay we call wadding. And that becomes a decorative element in the wood kiln. This is thrown thick with a hollow rim that's pushed up on two sides. The porcelain trapped a lot of ash. It was during the apprenticeship. Liz is not quite done with her apprenticeship. The weight is a little bit less than it looks. It is a stout plate. Today's word of the day is stout. Liz has been working hard on getting a foot that has the same kind of feel of generosity of the rim. Hashtag stout. Generous, yeah. One way to talk about generosity is generosity of materials. I think it's hard to make a really generous plate that's thin. If the material feels skimpy, might be counter to what you're trying to talk about if generosity is that thing. I think the plate's a nice plate. It's a little, functionally, it's a little rocky. It's a little heavy. My grandmother, it reminds me of a critique my grandmother gave me when she first picked up one of my plates. She says, "It's nice, but it's so heavy." And I think, yeah, it warped slightly. Maybe that was not so interesting to Liz to have it sit level. I like the pushed up sides. I don't know. It's hard for me to be as objective because I've critiqued Liz on these pots way before, several times before, and I've been watching the development. Is that how Grandmother Levin? Grandma Levin, Helen Levin has passed. But that's sort of my caricature of her. Yes. Grandma Levin. I like the plate. I like the fat rim. I like the generosity of it. I like the way it has movement. Liz is trying to make pots that are soft. It has a softness to it. The one term we use in the studio that I don't hear a lot of people use is clay treatment. Like how you treat the clay. Do you treat it like wood? Do you treat it like a different material? Do you treat it like fabric? Are you treating it? What kind of touch are you treating it? Sorry, my phone is ringing in the house. Sorry, it's a distracting interruption. I turned off all my notifications on this phone, and then the house phone goes off. Will you pick that up and answer that, please?
Yeah.
You're going to take notes. So, this plate, Liz is looking at the generosity of it. And her clay treatment is soft. It has a fluidity to it. I don't know if the circle wad, right dead center, speaks about fluidity. And I'm not sure that the really shiny, drippy effect of the surface, where we can choose to affect the way a pot looks. Static, I'm not sure about static, yeah, or sharp, or clean. I don't know if sterile. Ooh. Now. Well, it's not sterile because it's not so white. Let me zoom in a little bit. But if we look at that element, yeah, trolls are ringing my phone. If we look at that element without the rest of the plate, it's lovely. Does it belong on this plate, though? So the artist is Liz Vukelich, who is probably, she wore herself out last night firing the train kiln here. Yeah, she's one of my apprentices, and I think she's listening in. Liz, are you there? Oh, good. Is there something you want to know about this pot? About this plate, or anything you want to say about this plate? I am critiquing. Off center. Yeah, offset. Putting the dot off center might be interesting. There's a nice, because she's chosen to push up on two sides, it has set up a symmetry though. it is a long learning curve, but we can affect the flashing by how high we fire, how long we fire, where the pot is placed in the kiln. She could choose a clay body that is less reactive or more reactive. So somebody was commenting that they like these wad marks right where the clay pushes up. My forte, yes. Yeah, you can see that Liz is being very attentive to the size of wads, the number of wads. There's really a lovely attention to those things. The bottom is awesome. There's some good color there. Yeah, in fact, you're right. I like the bottom better than I like the top. Top's solid. Got to get props to the top. But the bottom wins. Check. I can serve it to you upside down. Sure you can. Yeah, the gray is nice. The green ash on there. The concavity affects the flashing, but you could fire it upside down. These are stout enough where I think Liz may have put one in this recent firing, fired on its side like this. I think this is an interesting thing, a topic we could talk about, is the wood firing effects. Often wood firing effects are so seductive, it's hard to see past them. Yeah, I may have to figure out a better internet connection. Maybe that would help with fidelity. I hear Facebook Live has got better fidelity. So I think this is a great thing to think about is if you were to be able to cover the surface and see the pot, does that flashing belong on that pot? How much of the planning gets lost in the firing method? I'm not sure how to assess that, but the more we fire, the closer we can range in. It rots a little bit, Lynn. So I think as wood-fire potters, we have to take ownership of the surface. We chose the clay, which gives us a palette of color. We chose how long we fire, what type of kiln, temperature we fire to, type of wood, how it was wadding. And Liz is owning all those things. Wobbly pot doesn't bother me too much unless I'm cutting something on it. That would bother me. Bother you, Lynn? I mean, if I was just sitting here eating or eating it in my hand, holding it in my hand, it wouldn't wobble. But yeah, if I was sawing on a tough steak and that thing was wobbling, that would bother me. Kinetic food. So, Liz, is there anything else you want to cover? Talk topically on derivative master-apprentice issues? Seems like my work. We can talk a little bit about the word derivative. Derivative is rarely used as a positive comment, like, oh, his work is so derivative. I would say that there are some things going on that make this look like my work. But those things are the fact that she's using a clay body that I'm using. She's firing it in kilns that I'm firing. They're my kilns, and she's my student. So those things are hard to change. But I don't teach a tight aesthetic tradition. Mostly my apprenticeship is set up for an evocative process where the apprentices find their own voice in clay. So I would have never made this pot to find your own voice, right? I would have never made this pot. And Liz's pots have become way more hers during her time here. And I think that's what I hope for as a teacher. And if you look at some of my former apprentices, their work I don't think you would call derivative. What we teach here is more a logic and this critiquing process and way to look at your own work so that you can make it more yours. And that's what we're talking about with Andrew's pots. Approximately 14 apprentices so far. So back to Andrew's mug. If he takes more and more ownership of those decisions, the pot will become more and more his. So my job as a critiquer is to point out the things that I see and where I don't think he's taking ownership of those, or maybe things he hasn't noticed, or give him a different way to think about the things he's already thinking about. Hey, Laura Toscano. So I'm going to end this Periscope. I'm going to upload it to Facebook. Yeah, you kind of do get blinders, that it's hard to see your own work. Because it's you're welcome, Lynn. Thanks. You're welcome, Liz. Yeah, hearts to Liz and Andrew. Send me some pots. Oh, look at all that love that's coming in for these pots. Send me some pots. Let's do this again. I think this, one thing I was going to say that so many different disciplines do peer review, and we don't. I learned the term pot shaming this year. Hey, Fran. And I don't think there is such a thing. I mean, it's not Liz or Andrew's ego that's up here. They've made something, and I'm telling them what I hear and what I see. And they get to, it's a really intimate space. And I want to thank everybody for respecting that. Do I need pots from atmospheric fires? No, not at all. It need not be atmospheric. In fact, some ways that's better. I think I'm harder on wood-fired pots than I am on any other pots because it's my bellywick. Well, we could try some non-functional work. Don't be scared. You can talk to Andrew and see how it was. Perhaps he's crying at home now. Thank you all. This was wonderful. Thanks for joining me. You didn't cry too much. Good. Good. The most educational scope ever. All right, I'm going to try and upload it to educate myself. I'm trying to upload this to Facebook. Y'all take care. Have a wonderful evening. I'm probably going to scope the unloading of our wood kiln here, and you can meet Liz in person. All right. Thank you all, Potters of Periscope.